Okay, we're set to go.
Okay, can we see everybody?
For everybody that has joined us today, we would love to see your smiling faces. So if you want to click on that video camera, so we can see you, that would be great. Well, hi, Susan. I think this is a shy group, Assemblyman.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm just gonna go to since I don't have the background, I'm gonna go to a quieter place here. Okay. Okay, start my video. Okay, I think I can set this here. Yes, okay. Well, I didn't realize I had that background in there, but now that I do, I guess I might as well just use it.
So my understanding was that your team was going to get us started today.
Yes. Okay, so is everybody on? I don't have, I guess I can't see who's on. I can't get the little squares on my Zoom right now, but I hope everybody's logged on at this point. Should we begin?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this. We normally do this in person. I'm Assemblyman Angelo Santa Barbara, and I'm chair of the Rural Resources Commission in the State Assembly. And Lyme disease and prevention and funding for research has been something I've been focused on. You know, we tend to think that Lyme disease is just in sort of the rural areas of our state, but the truth is you can be at risk in your backyard, and we're going to hear about that. So I want to thank Cornell University for helping me, partnering with me to put this on. Normally we do it at our local libraries, and we do it at local areas where we can talk about, have some visuals and some things that we can talk about in person, and some Q&A. And we're going to try and do the best to accommodate that in a virtual format today. So at some point we'll be back in person, but for now, I think it's important that people are participating and educating themselves on what they can do to protect themselves from Lyme disease. So thank you for Cornell University putting this together. As I said, today we're going to be hearing about some important information, how to protect yourself. The warm weather just came up on us, right? I mean, it was cold, and then all of a sudden it was just hot. But you don't really have to have warm weather for ticks to be at risk of ticks. I was out in my backyard chopping up some wood from a storm from last year, and certainly I saw ticks that were out. And we're going to talk about some prevention measures. You know, you can still do yard work, but you have to take some precautions on how to protect yourselves, especially the little ones, and even your pets for that matter. We're going to talk about Lyme disease, but we're going to talk about other tick-borne illnesses that can be just as serious. So these are things that are very important to be aware of. New York State actually has one of the highest rates of Lyme disease that continues to rise. Something is very alarming. We're seeing more and more cases of Lyme disease, and we're happy to see that more people are at least aware and getting diagnosed and getting the treatment, because a lot of people are not aware that they've been bitten by a tick. If you don't know the signs, if you don't know to look, take the precautions, and if not treated, it can manifest into one of the harshest conditions. It affects your mental and physical well-being. So something that's very, very serious. But the good news, there's good news. The good news is, with the appropriate treatment, most people can expect a speedy recovery. The idea is to learn about the signs, go in and seek medical care, and get the treatment if you need it. As I said, I chair the Rural Resources Commission. I'm also a member of the Agriculture Committee. We talk about a lot of different things in the state. And Lyme disease is one of them. I've been advocating for the testing, treatment, education, and awareness. And that's what this is here, because we need to take this serious, because it takes a physical and emotional toll on individuals, and of course your entire family. If one individual is affected, it takes a toll on everyone. So in addition to the funding, I secured in this year's state budget to establish a task force on Lyme disease to actively look into what the latest prevention measures, what the latest treatment is. I'm also going to be hosting a series of these events, as I do every year, They may not all be, they may be in person maybe later on, but for now they'll be in a virtual format to boost awareness in our community. It's very important that we ask the questions. If there's after the presentation you don't have a question about something, or you have need some more information, ask those questions or get back to my office. We're happy to provide that information. And as we're going to hear, last year I was able to, I still have my little kit, yes, it's a kit that a tick removal kit. It has some pretty neat things in it that you may not normally carry around with you. But this there's going to be a short survey at the end of this, and they will send you one of these tick removal kits. It has some good information, a little card, and some other things. Hopefully that's showing up there. So stick around. You're going to hear more information about how to get one of these. It has a little hook on it, so you can actually just hook it to your belt, and off you go, and you have this with you, a magnifying glass in there and some other things. So with that, Jolene Lampman is with us, and I can see her. Hopefully you all can see her too. She is the Community IPM Extension Support Specialist for the New York State program at Cornell University. We're very fortunate to have Cornell partner with us. They have a wealth of information on this. They've been my partner for years and years hosting these events, and I could not do it without you. Although you can't hear applause, hopefully some people are applauding for you right now. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for participating in this sort of virtual format. And hopefully we'll go back to in-person format maybe later this year if that's something that we can put together. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to you. I want to thank everyone for joining us, for being a part of this. Please share the information that you hear on this during this session. Share it with family, friends, and neighbors that maybe couldn't attend. And of course, there'll always be information on my website as well, a special Lyme disease banner, awareness banner that you can find information on my website, or you can always call my office or shoot me an email. So stay safe, stay healthy, everyone, and thanks for tuning in for this virtual event. Thank you.
Well, we really appreciate you setting this up and getting us an audience, because as you mentioned, this is incredibly important information, and it is incredibly vital right now at this time of year. And we'll certainly talk about that. And also, this is a particularly bad time of year. So the Assemblyman mentioned the tick removal kit. Which screen are you seeing right now? Are you seeing my presenter view, or are you seeing just my presentation?
Ticks avoiding the bite I see there with the,
Okay,
I think it shows the kit, yes.
Excellent. So I put that link within the chat box, and we'll put it in a few more times as we go on. Please fill that out. It's not very many questions. Once you do completely fill that out, you're going to get an email that says that thank you for completing the survey. And that's going to be your ticket to getting a tick removal kit. And right now we're arranging with the Assemblyman's office to be able to distribute those to everybody that's here on this presentation. So let's get going. All right. So basically, this is part of the Don't Get Ticked New York campaign. The funding from this originally came from the New York State Senate Task Force on Lyme and tick-borne diseases. And we've obviously been getting a lot of support from the Assembly as well to help us to get the word out about ticks. And there's a lot of misinformation that's out there. So hopefully by the end of this time together, you will all be dubbed tick ambassadors, because what I'm going to be presenting today is all research-based information, because we really need to be able to counter the misinformation that is out there. We really want to get the information about how to personally protect yourself from tick bites, much less the diseases that can be transmitted through those bites. And we also work really hard to make this information easy to understand. So a lot of what we've done with the funding is we were able to get graphic designers, and we have graphics and posters, and a lot of that you're going to see as I'm going through this presentation. And all of this is available on our website, which is www.don'tgettickedny.org. So what are we going to do today? We're really going to spend a lot of time talking about ticks and what they are and how they work, because that knowledge is going to help you to understand how to best protect yourself from the ticks. And then we're certainly going to talk about prevention through integrated pest management, which is using multiple strategies to deal with pests in a way that protects human health, the environment, and is also affordable. There are some great ideas on how to get rid of ticks, but a lot of them just aren't going to be able to be done by people with a standard budget. So we're giving you affordable solutions today. And then we're going to spend a little bit of extra time talking about proper removal of embedded ticks if the other strategies don't work, because that's where a lot of the real misinformation and sometimes dangerous information comes from. But the main focus of today is that you just don't want to get bitten by a tick. So basic biology. I am going to throw up our first poll, which is, which one do you think is the tick? Do you think it's the one on the left, or do you think it's the one on the right? So go ahead and put your thoughts in that poll. And right now I'm actually seeing a mix. Some people think it's the one on the left. Some people think it's on the one on the right. And I will tell you right now, that is incredibly common. The one on the left actually happens to be the tick. And we know that because it is it's an arachnid. They're related to spiders. So we have two body parts. So we have this giant abdomen, which we like to think of as a balloon filled with germs, and this teeny tiny little head, which has these amazingly long mouth parts compared to the rest of the body. Here on the right, we have a bed bug. It's an insect. It has 3 body parts: abdomen, thorax, and head, and only 6 legs. These both feed exclusively on blood, but they have very different behaviors. And the bed bugs don't pass along diseases, none so far that we are aware of, whereas the ticks seem just to have been made to host these pathogens and be able to spit them out into the hosts themselves, whether that host be a deer or a mouse or us or our companion animals. And just to make things really tricky, because this is the way nature works, we also, I threw up a picture of a tick. This is the larval stage. This is what comes out of the egg. And you will notice that it has only 6 legs. So I just like to provide this information if you really get into this and you're learning how to identify that if you find ticks that just hatched out of their eggs, they're only going to have those 6 legs, but they're really small. So you're really not going to know that unless you're able to throw it underneath a microscope. So worldwide, there's about 100 ticks that are out there, about 100 in the United States. Here in New York, there's only 3, maybe 4 that we're really concerned about from a human health perspective, a companion animal perspective, and our livestock. And those are the American dog tick, the Lone Star tick, the black-legged tick. You might have heard of this as the deer tick. At one time, they thought they were different species, but now they've decided that they're the same. So I'm going to be using black-legged tick throughout this presentation because that's what the scientists landed on. And then we also have the Asian longhorn tick, which kind of has a question mark on it in terms of how it's going to affect human health. So let's go into these a little bit more into depth, and I'll start with that question mark one, the Asian longhorn tick. When I say new, I mean new. It was discovered in New Jersey in 2017 on a sheep farm. The farmer came out and had ticks crawling right up her body. She called Rutgers, which is the Cornell equivalent in New Jersey, and they sent out people and they did identification and testing, and they determined that it was this Asian longhorn tick. As the name suggests, they do hail from Southeast Asia, but they've been invasive in other parts of the world, including Australia and New Zealand, where they've been a huge pest on livestock. So we've been really working with those countries to try to learn more about this particular tick and how they've been trying to manage it. So in 2017, it was discovered. They treated the sheep, they treated the farm. They came back in 2018 and they were still there and everywhere. So now all tick people are kind of on alert. We're looking for them. And lo and behold, we discovered that they were already in 15 states, including 7 counties in New York. And in fact, one of the projects that I was working on down in Westchester County, we had collected an Asian longhorn tick and had misidentified it as a very similar looking native tick. So they've been here for a number of years, just at low numbers where we weren't able to see them. As I mentioned, they're a real livestock tick, but they don't seem to be particularly fond of humans. There's this great video of somebody holding out their hand with Asian longhorn ticks on it, and they are scrambling to get off her hand as quickly as possible. So there are millions of these throughout the country at this point. Only 3 incidences of one actually biting and embedding into a human. So we're hoping that trend really continues. They're also not curing any of these tick-borne diseases that affect people. We now know that they're carrying one that affects livestock, and that's down further south in the United States. So we're watching it really carefully. And the really scary thing about this particular tick is that it can clone itself. So we have only found females in the United States, and a single female is able to lay 2,000 eggs all on her own with no males. So these populations can get really large really quickly. Like I said, we're watching it very carefully. All right, let's move on to the ones that we know are a human health consideration. The American dog tick is the one that if you're of a certain age, this is what we grew up with. They're big. Only the adults will get onto people or onto our dogs. If you've heard that if you want to avoid ticks, you stay out of the tall grass, it's because that's where these guys really like to be. And their favorite hosts include dogs and medium-sized mammals like raccoons and possums and coyotes. They'll also get on livestock, and of course, they'll also get on to people. So that's the American dog tick. We've had them for always, usually not at very high levels. The tick that's coming is the Lone Star tick. And right now we know that this one is firmly entrenched on Long Island and it's moving up the Hudson Valley. And in fact, we are coordinating and partnering with another program within Cornell University that has a project where we're going to determine how far north these are actually breeding. We will find them throughout New York State, including the area that we're talking about here, Albany, Schenectady, and Montgomery counties. But those typically get dropped off of migrating birds. So we'll find one here, one there, but we're not finding them in high numbers. We're not finding multiple age groups of them. So this year, we're going to try to figure out and really map out for sure where they are in New York. Their favorite hosts include deer and turkey, but they will also get it on us, on our companion animals, on livestock, and on other wildlife besides deer and turkey. This one, they're fast and they're very attracted to carbon dioxide. So if you're out on your lawn chair and they sense you, they sense your breathing and your heat, then they will actually come and get you. And the latest numbers that I read recently was that they can go about 100 yards in 1 minute. So they're very speedy for being very, very small creatures. But we're going to spend most of our time today talking about black-legged ticks. These are the ones that they're just prolific right now. It's not your imagination. They weren't here when we were kids. They've been expanding throughout the state, and they are now our most prevalent tick in most areas. They're seasonally, they really prefer the spring and the fall, which is a little scary because one of the misinformation pieces out there is that ticks are a summer issue. Dog ticks were a summer issue. Black-legged ticks are most active in the spring and in the fall. This one also needs high humidity. So we're going to be most likely to find it in wooded areas and shady areas and maybe wetter areas like in wetlands. And they have a very Catholic diet. They are going to be found on 120 hosts across the United States where they are, 27 different hosts in New York. And we'll get more into depth as we go on. And the way that we're telling the difference between these different ticks is we're looking at the mouth parts. As you can see, they look slightly different depending on the different ticks. And we're also looking at this piece behind the head called the scutum, and they all have different patterns there. So you don't need to memorize this. If you have questions, if you have a tick you want identified, you can bring that to your local Cornell Cooperative Extension office, and they can help you do that identification. All right, what else do we know about ticks? They are blood-feeding ectoparasites, so they feed exclusively on blood of other organisms, which is what makes them a parasite. Ecto stands for outside, so they're outside of the body feeders. So one of the myths out there is that ticks actually burrow into the skin, and that just doesn't happen. The only part that gets embedded into people is the mouth part here. The head never gets embedded. The rest of the body isn't following it. It's just the mouth part. And these legs, my goodness, they are made for climbing. They're really good at climbing even smooth surfaces. So when I'm capturing tick and I put it into a glass vial, they're just crawling up and down there. It doesn't matter. So some people think that if they put on rubber boots, that's going to keep them safe. They are just fine climbing up smooth rubber boots. So don't think that that's going to be able to protect you from the ticks. They're very small. So with this kind of close up of it, I want you to notice the small creature, and there's its foot. And when it's crawling, it's walking on its toes. So we're also not going to feel it crawling up our bodies, or sometimes we might get lucky and it might trip over a hair or something, which it twangs a nerve. But for the most part, we don't feel the ticks as they're crawling up us. So we can't count on that to help us know that there are ticks on us. And the way that they hunt is called questing. So they take their back legs and they grasp onto a piece of vegetation, and then their front legs are sticking out. And that's actually where their sense organs are, right about there. And they can sense carbon dioxide, they can sense heat, and they can pick up some smells too. Even people have pheromones, though we usually tend to call it feet smell. They can pick that up and they know that something is on its way, and it's hoping that it's going to brush by close enough that it can grab onto it with those front legs and then crawl up it. And it's going to crawl up until it finds a good, nice, dark, moist place that it wants to spend the next week feeding on blood. So this questing behavior usually is going to happen no more than 1.5 feet off of the ground, and usually even lower. So when we start talking about protecting ourselves, we really want to spend a lot of time thinking about how can we protect ourselves from the knee down. All right. And as I mentioned, they are very small. So black-legged tick from the left to the right. This right here is what comes out of the egg. That's the 6-legged larva. And you can see it almost fits in the groove of a fingerprint. Really, really tiny. Next stage is the nymph stage. And it is to give you some perspective, about the size of a poppy seed. Also just really, really small. And then these two, we've got the adult male and the adult female. They're larger, they're easier to find on us. Still small, but not nearly as small as these two life stages. And they have their preferred habitat. So if you were told and learned and think that you're only going to find ticks in the tall grass, well, that's not true anymore with the introduction of this black-legged tick, which is mostly going to be found in wooded areas, which are nice and humid, nice and shady. They can be found in tall grass areas that are also shady, and I found them in the middle of lawns. I actually did a project down in Westchester County looking to see if mulch mowing leaves made any difference to the tick population, and I wasn't able to collect enough ticks in that environment to be able to actually answer my scientific question. But I can tell you that over the course of 4 years, I found 63 ticks that were questing in the middle of these high-end Westchester lawns. So you can't consider that if you're on your lawn, you are completely safe. You are safer than if you were walking along the edge of the woods, but the ticks could be on the lawn. So you just need to think about protecting yourself no matter where you are. The Lone Star tick seems to like it all. The American dog tick, again, they like that drier, tall grass environment. And the Asian longhorn tick also seems to be happy almost everywhere, which will be relevant when they actually get to this area. Whoops, we're going to skip over that. So I picked up a tick this is a survey that was done. 2 different organizations did it. One did it in Connecticut, one did it in Montgomery County, Maryland. And they came up with pretty much the same answers, that when people were asked, where did you get this tick? People are often shocked to find out that 40% of people that got a tick found it or picked it up in their own backyard. We tend to think of our homes as safe. And when it comes to ticks, we just can't do that. There's this thought that we're going to find most of them when we go into the parks, if we go for a hike in the woods. And yes, they're there, but I suspect that the reason that the park number is so much lower than the home number, it's because when we are preparing to go for a hike, then we usually will take steps to protect ourselves from ticks, which we're not going to do if we're just going to go and fill the bird feeder in the back or cut back some brush because it's springtime and we're doing spring cleaning. The other really relevant number here is that over 25% of people had no idea where they picked up that tick, which it tells that what I was saying earlier, they're really sneaky, they're really small, they're really stealthy. You're not going to feel them crawling up you, and they don't want you to know that they're there even as they're feeding. So they're taking steps to make sure that you don't know that it's there, which means that you just don't know when you picked it up sometimes. All right, next, ticks are seasonal. So here we are in the spring, even though it feels like summer, but it is spring. The adults that have lasted the entire winter have laid their eggs by now. And those eggs are going to sit there and they're going to hatch out in midsummer. So late July, early August, those 6-legged larvae that can fit in the groove of a fingerprint, they're going to emerge. And because these get laid in clumps, you can get 2,000 ticks in one small area where a single tick laid her egg. If you have an area where a lot of ticks dropped off of an animal and you have multiple females that have done that, you can go into areas and you can pick up thousands and thousands of these ticks at any one time. And we affectionately call that tick bombs. Hopefully you won't run into one, but that's a possibility. So that larva, those larvae are all going to be looking for something to feed on. Now, typically what's going to wander by them first are going to be small mammals. So a mouse or a chipmunk or a shrew is going to wander by and they're going to get on, they're going to feed, and then they're going to drop off. And they're going to wait the rest of the summer, all of fall, all of winter, and in the spring, they're going to molt and become that poppy seed size nymph. That's happening right now. The nymphs are out there in very large numbers. They then are going to look for something to feed on. And again, typically this is going to be a small mammal because they're small and they're not traveling any kind of distance to look for something. So they're going to find something to feed on, and then they're going to wait the rest of the spring, all of summer, and a good portion of the fall is when they're going to molt into the adults. And now the adults are going to be looking for a larger animal to feed on because that's going to increase their chances of finding another tick that they can mate with so that the female can get fertilized and then will be able to lay their eggs while also having a great blood meal to give her the energy to create and lay those eggs and last through the entire winter. And then we start it all over again, that in the springtime, those females are going to lay their eggs. That's what the books say. this is what reality looks like. So much of this is very weather dependent. And also what happens in that tick's particular area. So if a tick doesn't have something walk by that it wants to feed on, it is very, very good at just waiting. So a few years ago, I was sweeping for ticks in May and I found a larva. That means that that larva hatched out in July and went through almost an entire year. And it was still questing and looking for a host. A few years ago, we went straight from dry winter, kind of a non-winter, into hot, dry summer. We didn't have that spring wet period. The nymphs just waited it out. They waited until it started raining in July, and then they emerged and they started looking for a host. If they had come out when it was hot and dry, they could have desiccated and died. So they just waited until conditions were right. With the adults, if they don't find something to feed on the fall, they also can just wait it out. And all through the winter time, if it is above 37 degrees and they're not covered with snow, the adults will be out looking for a host because they want to breed. They want to mate, they want to lay their eggs and pass on the next generation of ticks. So we still have leftover ticks now. We're still finding them. And recent research has showed that with ticks, with the adult ticks, they start getting desperate, if you will, and they are going to get a boost of energy, which means that they can travel more than they might normally, and they are also less cautious. So they're more likely to travel into areas where they might not normally, like the middle of lawns, because they're really desperate to just find something that they can get on and feed. So at this time of year, the nymphs are out in hordes, plus we've got really desperate adults. So this is an incredibly dangerous time of year for black-legged tick exposure. And then what's happening with the other ticks? Well, here's a calendar. Here we are in May and June, and you can see we've got black-legged tick nymphs and adults, as I mentioned. The dog ticks have been with us for about a month now. We've got Lone Star ticks that are out in multiple life stages, and where there are Asian longhorn ticks, they are also active. So right now is the most dangerous time of year, not only for black-legged ticks, but for everything as we move into the hotter summer and we start dealing with those summer ticks. All right, ticks are committed. I think I had mentioned that they're looking for that moist, dark place to spend up to a week, depending on the tick and the life stage. So an adult female black-legged tick wants to be on for about a week, and she's feeding and she's taking in the blood through her mouth parts. And for nutrition, she's really only interested in the solids. So she takes in the solids and then she wants to get rid of the excess liquids because that'll fill her up too much. So those get spit back into the host. So she sucks in the blood, the solids and the liquids get separated, and then the liquids get squirted back in. And this is one of the reasons that ticks are amazing at being able to transfer these pathogens, and why the pathogens have really co-evolved with these ticks, because they found the perfect host to be able to get them to move them from one host to another. So they're just getting larger every single day until the final day they're fully engorged, they drop off and they are waiting to go on to the next life stage. Also, their commitment revolves around their mouth part. So here's a close-up look of a tick mouth part. You can see the barbs that are on this. So once that gets inserted, it's really locked in there. In its saliva, it is also spitting in a cementing solution to really make sure that it's locked on and it's not going to accidentally get scratched off or brushed off. Along with that cementing solution, we've got in the saliva is anticoagulants to keep the blood flowing. We have antihistamines that are going to stop the host from having an allergic reaction so that it starts feeling itchy. It's going to be also putting in painkillers so you don't feel that happening over time. There's actually 1,000 different proteins and other chemicals that are injected along with the tick saliva. Most of what we don't know what they do. So there's actually a lot of research opportunities there. But for now, just know you don't want ticks spitting in you. And the way to not get a tick spitting in you is to not have them be able to embed in the first place. The other thing that I want to show you with this particular picture is when we talk about tick removal, a lot of that revolves around the desire to not leave the head in. And I'm here to tell you today that you can't leave the head in because the head never gets embedded. The tick only inserts the mouth part up to that point right there. So if you're removing a tick, you can't break the head off. You might break the mouth part off, but if that happens, I'm glad to tell you that it is only as dangerous as a splinter. I'm not saying splinters are safe. Sometimes they need medical attention, but you don't need to go to urgent care because the mouth parts got left behind. If you wouldn't go there for a splinter, don't go there for left behind mouth parts. So saving you money, don't go to urgent care for broken off mouth parts unless it looks like it's starting to get infected, because after all, it did leave a hole in your body. So that's always a possibility, but there's no more risk of getting any of these tick-borne diseases from the mouth parts than if the whole tick was removed successfully. All right, ticks need hosts. I mentioned that there are 27 different types of animals that they feed on in New York. And this is just a collage of a few of them. Some people, they're not all treated equal. There's actually a research project that showed that they took a bunch of different types of animals and they put ticks on them, and they wanted to see which ones were the ticks were the most successful at being able to fully feed, drop off, and then be able to move on to their next life stage. So you might have heard that possums are going to save us from ticks. And indeed, this project did tell us that when you put 100 ticks on the possum, that most of them got groomed off. I never looked at a possum before and thought that here's an immaculate groomer. Turns out they're really good at it. However, now that we're really looking at this Asian longhorn tick, we're doing a lot more mammal trapping to find out what's going on with that tick. And when they're looking for the Asian longhorn ticks, they're finding a lot of black-legged ticks on the possums. So it seems that possums are really good at grooming themselves if they're sitting in a cage with nothing else to do. So love possums. We should do everything we can to maintain diversity in our environment, but they're not going to save us from ticks. The other animal that I put on here that people think are going to save us are guinea hens or chickens. And you've probably heard that they're going to go out there and they're going to eat all the ticks. And they will eat a lot of ticks, but they're only eating the adults. They can't even find the nymphs. And unlike the ticks from the original study that said, oh, we can get rid of ticks with chickens, that was in Africa, and those particular ticks only fed on livestock. So they let chickens in, they picked the ticks off of the livestock, and it really made a huge difference. The ticks that we have are just as happy to eat chickens as they are to be eaten by chickens. So it's a wash. They're not going to protect you from getting a tick-borne disease, unfortunately. One of the ones that really makes a big difference in this whole tick-borne disease story are white-footed mice. And white-footed mice and people have been intricately connected since there's been people in North America. They love these simplified environments that we create when we cut down forests. We get rid of snakes and hawks and foxes. So there's not things that are eating it. There are less things that they are competing for food. So where there are people, we're going to see much larger populations of these white-footed mice. And they're excellent breeders. They breed young, they breed a lot, they breed multiple times a year. And their immune systems don't care about these tick-borne pathogens. It doesn't affect the mouse themselves. So in the Capital District, 90 to 95% of these white-footed mice can be infected with the pathogen that causes Lyme disease with no effect on the mice at all. So every tick, and you can see all the ticks that are on this ear and around the eye, are sucking in the pathogen that causes Lyme disease as it's sucking in the mouse blood. And not just Lyme, about 50% of the mice in this area are infected with pathogens that cause other tick-borne diseases. So these mice are part of the entire equation for ticks, as are deer. We call them deer ticks. They're actually a dead-end host for Lyme disease. So even if every single one of these ticks that are engorged on this ear have Lyme disease, they are not, that the Lyme disease pathogen is not going to build up in that deer's body to the point that if any of these ticks didn't have Lyme disease, that they're going to be able to absorb it and then pass it on to the next host. So we consider that to be a dead end host. It doesn't mean that there are no impacts. People are also dead end hosts for Lyme disease, but obviously if we get the Lyme, it really affects us in a negative way. So just because you're a dead end host doesn't mean that everything's going to be all right. What deer do is they are really good at spreading ticks. And the black-legged tick in particular has been shown that when it feeds on deer blood as compared to any other mammal blood, they are going to be able to lay more eggs than if they had fed on a coyote or a raccoon. So we like to think of deer as the cruise ships for the ticks. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet. There's ample opportunities for sex, and they get to travel to exotic places because deer have really large territories. So as our deer populations have expanded, the ticks have been spreading as well. So when we think about larger landscape ways of dealing with ticks, deer definitely have to fall into that equation. All right, why am I telling you this? Some of this might feel like it's not really necessary, but I'm leading up to a point, and the point is this is an awful, terrible year. And the reason it's an awful, terrible year is that in 2019, we had a mast year. And trees can actually communicate with each other, which is a whole fascinating topic in itself. But trust me on this, they communicate with each other and they coordinate that they are all going to create massive amounts of acorns and let them drop in 1 year. And this benefits the oak trees in that they are just overpowering all of the animals that like to feed on acorns, like the mice and the chipmunks and the deer and the turkeys and just lots of animals that like to do that. There won't be enough animals to eat all the acorns, which is going to increase the chance that some of these acorns are going to be able to sprout and become saplings and eventually turn into mighty oaks on their own. So 2019, we had these acorns everywhere, which meant that as we went into the winter of 2019, 2020, the things that eat acorns had a fantastic year. There was so much food there. So you had way more of them be able to survive the winter, very little starvation. Because they were so well fed, they were able to hit sexual maturity earlier. So they started having young sooner. They had larger litters. They had litters more often. So by the end of 2020, we had a ton of mice and chipmunks and deer and turkeys that had been feeding on the 2019 food source. Now we get into the end. So now following year, we get into the year of 2020, 2021. We didn't have this huge food source. So now all of these things that eat acorns, and there's so many of them, start to die off from starvation. Now we come into springtime and there are fewer of these hosts that are out there running around. But when we had all of those hosts, the ticks took advantage of that food source. So we had many more ticks that were questing and were able to find a host that was able to get a full blood meal, that were able to survive to the next life stage, that were able to feed and the adults were able to lay their eggs this springtime. So 2021, we have a convergence of way more ticks because they had a huge food supply last year, but we also have less hosts, wildlife hosts, because they didn't have a good winter. So now we have all of these ticks, less wildlife running around, which means that it's more likely that as we're walking around, we're more likely to run into a tick than we might have last year. And last year we were hearing that the Lyme numbers were pretty substantial. So if you've heard that this is a bad tick year, it is, and this is why. And just having a lot of ticks out there wanting to feed on our blood, if that wasn't bad enough, because there's definitely an ick factor there, we have these ticks that transmit pathogens. So here we go, we have the larva, and for the most part, the larvae are going to hatch without carrying any pathogens themselves. And they're going to usually look for a small mammal to feed on. And if that small mammal has a pathogen, that tick is going to pick it up through the blood meal, and it's going to bring it with it to the next life stage, which is now going to look to feed to something. If that nymph now looks to feed on something that doesn't have the pathogen, well, as it's feeding with its blood meal, it's going to pass it along to it. Or conversely, if the first host didn't have a pathogen, this is a second opportunity for the tick to pick up one or more pathogens from the host. So the nymphs have fed once, the adults have fed twice. For the most part, adults are twice as likely to be carrying a tick-borne disease pathogen than the nymph. But we consider the nymph to be the most dangerous life stage because of its small size, because people don't find it on them. Most people that get Lyme disease didn't even know that they had a tick on them. And that just is because these really small, stealthy animals were never discovered as they were feeding. And information from the CDC really plays this out for us. You can see here, this is diagnosis of Lyme disease. And most of those diagnoses happened in June and July from tick bites that happened in May and June. So here's yet another reason that now is the most dangerous time, and we really need to be paying attention to this. And Lyme disease has been spreading. These are also maps from the Center for Disease Control, and you can see from 2001 on the left-hand side, it was mostly isolated to Long Island and the lower Hudson Valley, mid-Hudson Valley. Now, fast forward, the latest map they have is 2018, and you can see that it's spread throughout all of New York. So no matter where we go, we're going to find ticks with Lyme disease now. And it's not just Lyme disease. So the black-legged tick itself can transmit the pathogens that cause Lyme disease, anaplasmosis, babesiosis, Powassan virus, Borrelia miyamotoi, and ehrlichiosis. Lone Star ticks can carry their own host of diseases. We're not going to get into those too much because they're not here yet, but we have all this information on our website. American dog ticks, which are here, mostly it's going to be Rocky Mountain spotted fever, but thankfully that's pretty rare in New York. And these Asian Longhorn ticks, we've shown in the lab that they can transmit Rocky Mountain spotted fever. We haven't found any yet in the wild in North America that is carrying the pathogen that causes it, but there is that possibility. We're paying attention to it. And then sometimes there's other effects that we might get from ticks that have nothing to do with disease pathogens. So tick paralysis is one that I like to bring up, mostly associated with female American dog ticks, but sometimes you can get it from other types of ticks as well. There's something in the saliva that some people react to that causes a paralysis that starts in the toes and works its way up the body. And it eventually can reach the respiratory system and shut it down, and people have died from this. I want you to know about this because if you see this on somebody and you find the tick, so you say that's tick paralysis, let's look for the tick. As soon as the tick gets removed, that paralysis and those symptoms start to reverse right away. So you can save somebody's life just by being aware of tick paralysis and telling people to look for that tick. The other non-pathogen impact that I like to bring up, and I particularly find it really useful when talking to young male adults about the risk of ticks, is something called the alpha-gal allergy, also known as red meat allergy. Alpha-gal is a carbohydrate that is found in all mammals except for primates, which of course we are. So if you get bit by this Lone Star tick in their saliva, along with everything else, they're spitting in this alpha-gal carbohydrate. And if you are susceptible to that, you can develop an allergy, which means that every time you get exposed to alpha-gal in the future, you're going to have an allergic reaction. So how do you expose yourself? By eating a hamburger, by eating a hot dog. Any mammal that you consume has this alpha-gal in it, and if you eat it, you can start getting that reaction. And every time you expose yourself to it, it's that allergic reaction is going to get worse and worse. Now, not everybody gets this, just like not everybody is allergic to poison ivy or bee stings. But the more you get bit, the greater the likelihood to the exposure of that allergen that you will develop an allergy. So also very, very good reasons to never get bit by a tick. Going back to the black-legged tick, I just want to kind of point out a couple of the diseases. Lyme disease, anaplasmosis, Borrelia miyamotoi, and ehrlichiosis are all caused by bacteria. And the tick might not eat for 9 months. So if it has that bacteria in its gut, it's just sitting there dormant, waiting for the blood meal to hit. So as soon as the tick starts feeding, the blood hits it, that kind of wakes up that bacteria. They start multiplying and they move out of the gut and they move through the tick until they reach the salivary glands and then can get spit into you. That takes time. And we don't know exactly for sure how long that takes. Some people say 24, some people say up to 72. Now I want to talk about Powassan virus. Powassan virus actually survives throughout the entire tick body, so it can be transmitted after 15 minutes of attachment. So we don't have that period of time to find the tick and remove it before having that pathogen injected into the body. Powassan virus is untreatable, as viruses are. We can support the body, but we can't cure the body. It needs to heal itself. And it is fatal 11% of the time. Now, thankfully, it's incredibly rare. It's expanding, but up to this point, there's only been 27 cases of Powassan virus in New York State that we know of. And it's very serious. It's our first fatal tick-borne disease that we have in this state. So that, to me, don't get bit by ticks. You don't want this virus and you don't want to be exposed to it. The last one I want to mention is to go back to the Borrelia miyamotoi. This is the only bacteria that we know of that a female that is carrying that bacteria in her body will actually transmit it into the eggs. So when that larva hatches out, they're already carrying Borrelia miyamotoi in their bodies. So they can start spreading that disease to their host from their very first blood meal. Serious stuff. And this shows, these are 2018 numbers from the Center for Disease Control, the spread of these different tick-borne diseases. And as you can see, most of them started on Long Island, up the Hudson Valley. They're tracking the same way that Lyme disease did across the state. So as time goes on, these diseases are going to spread more and they're going to be found throughout larger swaths of the state. And I picked out some information. So those were cases, human cases that were reported. The Department of Health does tick surveillance across the state. So they collect ticks and then they test them for ticks or for these different tick-borne diseases. So I just thought I would throw these numbers out. So in Albany County, 57 of adult black-legged ticks are carrying, on average, from 2008 to 2020, on average have been carrying the pathogen that causes Lyme. With the lightest year, only 48% of them were, and the heaviest year, 66% of them were. Anaplasmosis, 12% is the average, with up to 20% 1 year of the ticks collected carrying that. Babesiosis, 7 is the average, 14 is the high year, and so on. What I really want to point out here is that you will see that the numbers are about half from the adults to the nymphs, and that's because the adults have fed twice, so they've had 2 opportunities to pick up these pathogens in their body. But again, even though just over a quarter of the nymphs that are out there are carrying the pathogen that causes Lyme disease, they're still small. You could easily get 4 on you in 1 year, with the odds that one of them would be carrying it. So you really, this again is the most dangerous time of year. Schenectady County, the numbers are about the same, a little bit lower as we go farther west. And the same thing with Montgomery County. We still have all of these diseases are in the county, slightly lower numbers than we have in Albany County, but that's going to change as these continue to move west. All right, hopefully I've got your attention. And a lot of times at this point, people are going to feel like, I'm never going outside again. Now we get into the portion of the program where we're going to talk about how you can go outside again. Please go outside. So we're going to talk about what we like to consider to be the Swiss cheese model. So there's no one thing that you can do to protect yourself from ticks that is going to work every single time. So we're going to use multiple methods, and each method is going to catch most of the ticks. Some are going to get through. So the next method is going to catch some of what got through the first one. So we're going to have a third strategy in place. So let's get into the more strategies you have in place, the safer you are going to be from getting a tick bite and getting these tick-borne diseases. Every list of how to protect yourself always starts with avoiding tick areas. I have to mention it because it is a recommendation, but who wants to do that? We love to be outside. We live in upstate New York. It's gorgeous out there. So this really isn't an option. So there are some things that we can do when we go outside to make it a little bit safer. So if we like to walk, we can choose trails that are wider, that are concrete, because if there's no vegetation that the ticks are questing on, then it's less likely that we're going to brush up against a plant and have a questing tick get onto us. This only works if you stay in the middle of the trail. Last year, people were getting off the trail to maintain that 6-foot distance. So that sent a lot more people into the tick zone than they might if we weren't trying to maintain that distance. Or if you're on this trail and you have a dog on a leash, chances are they're getting into this habitat as well. So choose your trails wisely. As we go to the right, we get less and less tick safe. And this one is really not tick safe at all, but I point it out because it leads to my favorite trout hole. And I am not going to give up what I love to do because of fear of ticks. And there's other steps that we can take besides avoiding tick habitat. And in fact, one of my favorite spring hobbies is to take pictures of spring wildflowers. So here we are in the springtime, and I go out and I lie on my stomach in the middle of woods. This is probably the worst tick risk activity that you can do. I have not gotten a tick doing this because we're using other solutions. And this is just another reminder of you never know where you really can't avoid the ticks. This is down on Long Island. It's hot, it's really sandy, dry, not an area where you would think there were ticks. And we certainly didn't find any black-legged ticks here. We had to go into the woods to find them, but this was just loaded with Lone Star and American dog ticks that can stand that drier, hotter conditions. This one really took even me by surprise. This is in Rockland County. It's a golf course. I was crossing over this divider, and that short jaunt over there, I had gone through a tick bomb, and I had about 500 Lone Star tick larvae on me. So this is an island. It's not connected to those woods, but they were able to survive there. So even if we decide that we want to try to avoid tick habitat, it's really difficult to do. All right. So what are we going to do instead? Well, we're going to remember that ticks quest, and most of the time they're going to be questing from below knee height. So one thing that we can do is we can dress to protect ourselves. So you've heard the recommendation to tuck your pants into your socks. And I know it's hot and unpleasant if it's 90 degrees to be wearing long pants. Clothes do come in different weight levels, so you can get incredibly light, airy pants that is going to serve this purpose. What we want to do is we want to prevent the ticks from getting underneath our pants or our shorts, whatever we're wearing, because they're aiming for the dark, moist place. And you can kind of use your imagination of where that is as they're traveling up our body. So if we have our clothes that are tucked in, that means that the ticks have to crawl over the pants and up. And if they get to this point and our shirt is tucked in, they have to keep crawling. And it's not until they reach the neck, until they reach skin and can start looking for a place where they want to spend that week sucking blood. If it's the young life stages, the larva or the nymphs, they might actually give up by this point and drop off. Or if you're wearing light colored clothing and you kind of check yourself every once in a while you're walking around, you can often see them on the light colored clothing. So I'm just going to quickly show this video. This is a tick that I've collected on fabric, and it's not moving particularly fast. It can take up to 2 hours for them to get to where they want to go, but it's not moving particularly slow either. So if you're looking for it and you just look for the movement, even though it's only poppy seed size, you might be able to catch it, but only if it's on the outside of your clothes. And hey, we are a country that used to rock leg warmers. So if we could think of a style along that and make it fashionable, we'll be fashionable and protecting ourselves from ticks. All right, let's up our game some more. We can apply repellents to our skin. So there are 4 products that have been proven to be effective against ticks. That is the classic DEET. We also have picaridin, IR3535, which is the active ingredient in Skin So Soft, and oil of lemon eucalyptus. And all of these will last for different amounts of time. With DEET and picaridin, the higher the concentration, the longer that is going to work, up to a point. We don't recommend anything higher than 30%. It doesn't give you any further benefit or protection. So DEET and picaridin, 30% or less, or these other products. Make sure that you read the label. And if you get your tick kit, one of the things that will be in there is a magnifying lens. And you're going to need this magnifying lens to read the directions on the repellent bottle because it's really, really small. But even if you've been using the same product for 20 years, read it again. And it's actually a good idea to read it every time you get a new bottle because the instructions will sometimes change. So for example, all of them are going to tell you, do not apply to skin that you are going to put clothing over. And that's because the research as they were developing the product showed that it wasn't as safe if you put clothing over it. So only exposed skin. Some of the products you can put on your clothing. Some of them say do not apply to clothing. So you want to make sure that you read that label. And what these repellents do is it's supposed to mess with the sense organs of the tick so they don't see you as a host. So it's not killing them, it's just having it so that they don't recognize you as something that they might want to feed on. Now, if we want to up our game even more, because ticks are really small and we can't apply repellent to skin that is covered by socks, and if we have socks that are really lightweight and when we stretch them out, there's big gaps in there, so those six-legged larvae can get through, there is a solution for that, and that is permethrin treated clothing. And there's two ways we can do this. We can do this by buying pre-treated clothing, and they're available online, and a lot of stores are having them now. And those are supposed to last for the life of the garment or 70 washes. I don't know about you, my clothes last for a lot longer than 70 washes. And because it has this pesticide on it, it's going to tell you do not retreat. So to me, it's an investment, not one I'm willing to make. So I go for the do-it-yourself. And so you can buy a bottle of that, you can apply it to your clothing, not while you're wearing it. And that's, depending on the product that you get, it's going to last for 6 weeks or 6 washes, whichever comes first. And again, you're going to get out your magnifying glass, you're going to read that bottle. It's going to take you to go outside on a non-windy day and to spray your clothing with that product just until it changes color. So we're not drenching it. These aren't dripping wet. They're just getting moistened. And once that's dry, there is a chemical in that product that binds it to the fabric. So it's kind of locked in there. It'll slowly, over the course of 6 weeks, wear off so that you need to reapply it, but it's not getting absorbed into your skin. You're not getting rubbed off onto your hands. It's locked into the fabric. So this has hands down been the way to best protect yourself from getting a tick bite, is these permethrin treated clothing. And even if you just do your socks and your shoes, you're going to go a long way in protecting yourself, with the caveat that if your shoes are waterproof, it won't be able to lock onto that. So you'd be wasting product. So this only can go on to cloth material, and that is not water repellent, so that it'll be able to lock in. And when you go to the store, make sure that you really pay attention. This is just an average hardware store that we walked into, and we have products that you apply to your skin right alongside products that you can only apply to your clothing. So make sure that you know what you're getting, and you're going to protect yourself and not dangerously apply one of these pesticides. All right, another level of that Swiss cheese to prevent tick bites. When we come inside, if we take off our clothing and we put it straight into the dryer, that's going to kill the ticks if that dryer gets up to 122 degrees. Ticks have been shown to be able to survive a hot wash followed by a dryer, because there's still enough moisture in that they're able to survive. So if you throw them straight into the dryer, that's a great way to kill them. And while your clothes are in the dryer, you're naked. So now it's time to do your tick check. And this is something that we recommend, just build it into your daily routine. You're gonna brush your teeth, you're gonna floss, you're gonna do your tick check. And the tick check involves looking at your entire body. You're looking for freckles that weren't there before. And if you see something, you're going to take out your magnifying glass. You're going to see if that new freckle has legs. It's a great idea to do this in the shower, because not only can you use your eyes, but if you get your hands nice and soapy and you just run your hands over your body, it's a very smooth glide. And you can feel bumps on you that you might not normally if you were doing it on dry skin. So look with your eyes for new freckles, feel with your fingers for new bumps that weren't there before. You do this every day, And in no time, you're going to know every freckle, every mole, every skin tag on your body. And it's only going to take you a few minutes every night to do that overview of your body to make sure you don't have any of these parasites that are hanging on. And just kind of keep it in the back of your mind at all time. This is my favorite tick graphic from our friends at Tick Encounter at the University of Rhode Island. You're just sitting there waiting for something to happen anyway. So you might as well take that opportunity to check for ticks in that dark, moist area, which is a big favorite of theirs. And another reason to do it every day. So even if you haven't been outside today or even yesterday, every day that the tick is on you and it's feeding, it's getting bigger and bigger and easier to find. So you might have missed the one that you got 2 days ago. If you look every single day, you can find it. And it's better to find one at day 3. By day 3, any pathogens that it was carrying is definitely going to have been injected into your body, but at least you knew the tick was there, and that's information that you can provide to your doctor. All right, let's talk about removal now. Those other strategies didn't work. And most of them, the more you have, the more it's going to work. But sometimes we just get that tick that has gotten its way through and it's embedded. Most of the myths out there are about tick removal. And they're things like touch it with a match or a cigarette, smother it with Vaseline or nail polish remover. Put a drop of soap on it and twirl it with a Q-tip because you're unscrewing it. And that way the head won't get left behind. Well, we've already covered, you can't leave the head behind. And all of those methods are just going to irritate the tick. And an irritated tick is a salivating tick. So if it gets irritated, it's going to spit even more saliva into us. And that we do not want. So we want to treat the tick as gently as possible until we get it off of our body. So the way we're going to do this, and again, this is something that you will get in your tick removal kit. These are very sharp, pointy tweezers, and you're going to really focus on the skin more than the tick itself and grab it, and then you're going to pull straight up. And remember, that tick is locked in, and your skin is going to pop up, but eventually it's going to release with the least amount of stress on the tick itself. So here's a quick video that shows this happening in a couple of settings. And these are incredibly pointy tweezers. So when you see me removing a nymph, these look like scissors compared to the size of the tick. So it's easy to see why larger blunt tweezers would never allow you to grab just where the mouth part meets the skin. Okay. So that's how we want you to remove the tick. And we do recommend that you keep the tick, have it identified so that, and talk to your doctor beforehand, your next physical, or just call them up tomorrow and say, what is your tick protocol? Because every physician has a different procedure that they want to do. And we're not making any recommendations ourselves. That's beyond what we do at Cornell University in the Integrated Pest Management Program. But what we do is we provide you with the information that you can then provide to your doctor. So you can let them know it was this species of tick. If you bring it to a Cornell Cooperative Extension office to be identified, I have provided all of them with information on how to guesstimate how long it was attached, so they can provide you with that information. So you can go to your doctor and say, okay, it's a black-legged tick nymph and it was attached for 2 days. What do you want to do? and then the doctor will decide what set of treatments they want to do. My particular doctor is a wait and see doctor. So he wants to wait and see if I develop any symptoms before taking any action. These other doctors will take other steps. I threw up this slide. It's an app, the Tick app. And this is a citizen science project where they're actually looking at how people's behavior impacts the likelihood that they're going to get a tick bite. So you download this for free. There's no advertisements. They're not selling your contact information. It's purely for science. It's asking what you did that day, what tick prevention steps that you took. And if you do get a tick, you would report that on there. You can take a picture of it, and they can do the identification for you and actually provide you with some of this additional information. So I would encourage you to participate in this particular project. And again, you would just go to your app store and download the Tick app. So thank you for your consideration for that, because that information also helps us as we further develop educational programs. So I've provided a lot of information. What I really want you to leave going away with is that the more strategies you put into place, the safer you're going to be from getting a tick on you and getting that tick bite that could lead to a tick-borne disease. So whichever ones you do, whether you're going to avoid habitat, don't do that one. You go outside, it's nice out there. Dress to exclude, using repellents, Permethrin treating clothing, doing that daily tick check, incorporating the dryer. And if you do get a tick embedded, properly removing the tick in a timely manner are all going to help to protect you. So you don't want to get bitten by a tick. The consequences are too dire, but you can protect yourself by taking those steps. So please go outside, enjoy our glorious state. I've thrown a ton of information at you. All of this information and more, and a lot more videos are available on our website, which is don'tgettickedny.org. And we also can be found on social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Flickr, Instagram now. It's usually at New York NYSIPM. And most of the stuff that we post has to do around ticks. So we hope to see you in social media. Do we have any questions? So if you do, you can go ahead and put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask them out loud. Okay, I have put up that Tick Kit survey link. So please go ahead and open that up and fill it out. And once you have filled it out, you will get an email saying thank you for sending that to us. We will have your email address, so we will be in contact with you to let you know how we're going to go ahead and get that tick kit to you. All right. Does everybody have the link? Oh, I don't know the Indian Lake area, Michelle, I'm sorry. I'm mostly familiar with what's in the direct capital district. But if anybody out there is familiar with Indian Lake and has any recommendations, if there's a state park there, they typically have wider trails. But like I said, it's not an area I am familiar with. Well, all right. Well, thanks again to the Assemblyman for providing me with this opportunity to pass this on, information on to you. You are now all dubbed tick ambassadors. Please go out and spread this information because we need to get the good, correct, research-based information out there to keep people safe. And with that, I am going to end the meeting. Take care, everybody. Good night.